So you can follow along with me, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a technique for doing something, and then I'm going to pause the video and we get a chance to do it, and then I'm going to go further and show you another technique for doing something else, and so forth and so forth. So that hopefully everybody gets a good grounding in the basics of how this stuff is set up. In the first semester, we're really only dealing with the architecture tab for most of things. So the top left-hand tab up here is what we're using, because we're only really dealing with modeling of the building. Later on in the second semester, we'll get into actually pulling the values out of the model for construction, because Revit isn't just like SketchUp or one of these 3D modeling programs. It's actually full of information that can be used directly in the construction. So you can actually get it to calculate the cost of the building for you if you type in the right parameters. So the modeling part of it is just the basic element to it. So we need to get that down. I'll also say to you is you only get 2 semesters of teaching in Revit. It's only first and second semester. So you should really have control over the basic modeling stuff by the end of the first semester. If you don't, you'll be a bit lost in the second semester, and you'll start to get frustrated and demotivated, because it's a difficult program to learn. There's kind of stages of understanding of Revit, and the first stage is just deep frustration and anger. That's what most people experience. So it's quite normal, because it's not really intelligently designed for human beings yet. It's got some weird little quirks about it. So you kind of have to figure out what the quirks are as you're going through it, because it is one of the 4 programs that are now legally required to be used if you're making public buildings. You have to make a BIM model. So you have to learn something like this. This is the most popular one at the moment, so we're teaching this one. The other ones? Yeah. Let me just pause the video here because I'm just waffling. So we have this model. If I type WT, WT stands for window tile, and that'll set up all your drawings that you have open at the same time. It'll just tile them on the page for you. If you've got 10 drawings open, it's going to tile all 10 drawings across for you. So I'm going to shut down what we don't need. We don't need the splash screen here, but I'm going to open up level 1. So there's level 1, and let's have a look at level 2. Yeah, I'll tell you what, we'll just use level 2. So now if I type WT again, it organizes the windows for me like that. So now I want to put a roof on top of this house. So the easiest way to put a roof on, if we come up to the architecture tab and we go across to roof, we have roof by footprint. And roof by footprint is basically the shape of the building on the ground. You basically draw the shape of the building, it calculates a roof for you. So it's the simplest way of making a roof. So if I type roof by footprint, you see we get this little drawing panel up here, this little shape panel. And it defaults to pick walls. So we've got an option to pick the walls, we've got an option to pick lines, or we can do a free-form shape for the roof, based on a line or a rectangle or, different shapes, curves, and so forth. One of the quickest ways to make it is to use pick lines. So I'm going to use pick lines, and then I'm going to go into the plan. I'm going to pick the edges of the walls like this. And I'm only going to pick one. If you notice here, it's only choosing one panel of the curtain wall I have. So I'm only going to pick one of them because I don't want to have, all I need is a direction. And then I'm going to pick the end here. So wherever it shows purple lines, that means we've started to develop the shape of the roof. But we need to close them. So one of the main principles of Revit is that you always need to close the geometry, so it's one complete loop with no lines overlapping or no lines with gaps in them. Otherwise, these things won't work. So usually a quick way to do it is to use this button here, Trim Extend to Corner. I press Trim Extend to Corner. And if I select this line here and this line here, you can see it closes the gap between them. And I can just continue around until the entire roof is set up as a loop, one continuous line. Everybody got that? No answer. Take that as a yes. Okay, so My mouse has stopped working. Okay, so once you have the entire thing enclosed, let me just plug my mouse in here. You can just accept it. Now notice these little right angle triangles that are existing on each of the lines you've made. That means that there is an angle generated by that line. So if I accept the roof as we've designed it here, it's asking me, would you like to attach the highlighted walls to the roof? I'm just going to say yes. It's just telling me it's deleting some of the sweeps we made. You get this very, very ugly basic roof. Well, it's not that ugly, I suppose, but there isn't really much thought gone into it. So it makes a very simple roof. It takes an angle from all the lines surrounding the roof. So that's what it does by default. But we can modify that. So we can come back in and select the roof again, and you can see that it doesn't matter what view I select it in. It selects it in all the views. So you can click it on any view and it will select it. Then I can press Edit Footprint. And if I roll the cursor on top of one of these lines and press Tab, the Tab button here, you can see that it selects all of the lines of the roof. So now if I click it, we can modify all of the slopes in one go. Okay? So now up here we have something that's called Define Slope. If I tick that off and accept it, it's made a flat roof. So the roof now is completely flat. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's not the only way we can do it. If I select it again, edit the footprint, I can individually go in here and say, well, maybe I want this roof to have a slope from the inside, because we want it to slope out from the inside, because that's what the design is. And you can see it's actually giving us a degree there. It's giving us a 30-degree slope. So if I just accept that, it makes a slope like this, which is probably not the best type of roof you want. So it takes one slope and puts it across the entire roof. Okay. So again, we want to modify it a little bit more. I'm going to say edit the footprint, and we can do it in 3D view as well, because you can see the pink lines appear in 3D view. I can select this line and say, well, we want to give it a slope. And we can also give this one a 30-degree slope and accept it. And then we get something like that. And you can see that because the walls are attached to the roof, it doesn't matter what we do with the roof, but the walls will follow along and stretch smaller and bigger based on how we do it. So we have something like that. Has everybody got that? Okay. Of course, we don't have to give it the same angle. We could give it a different angle. I could change the angle of this one, for example, to 20 degrees if I wanted to. And that would just calculate the junction differently in the roof here. You see what I mean? So you can play with the slopes until you get more or less what you want. And this is kind of the basic way of making roofs. It's very, very simple, and in most standard houses you don't need to use anything else until you get that geometry working. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, so now, has everybody got some kind of curtain wall in their building? This is what we did last time. We had some kind of curtain wall in here. If you don't, you can always come into one of your walls and just select it, change it from a basic wall, for example, and just roll down and change it to a curtain wall. Probably storefront is the simplest one to use. And it will just pop in like that. So a curtain wall is always very, very easy to put into a building, because it's just a wall. You can, as soon as you put a wall in, you have the position, the geometry of the wall. Then you can modify the type of the wall, and one of the types you can change it to is a curtain wall, which is just a simple way of setting up a glazing system. But it has more options in there, and I'm just going to introduce it a little bit today, because it's actually a really useful tool to use in designing houses. And it can get very, very complex. But if we keep it simple, at least for the first semester, we can get a lot out of it. First thing I can do is I can select the wall here. And you see, you can select either the entire wall, or you can go in and select the individual elements of the wall, which I'll talk about in a minute. The first thing we want to do is select the entire wall. And we want this also to follow the line of the roof. So I'm just going to say attach, and then I'm going to select the roof. And it says highlighted walls are attached but miss the highlighted targets. Okay, so let's just say okay. So what that means is that the actual roof is not coming far enough beyond the edge of the curtain wall to allow the wall to attach to it. So we need to go in and modify the roof a little bit more in here. So I'm just going to go in here, edit the footprint. I can select this element here, and we can, well, let's just make it simple. I'm just going to move it away from the glass wall. I'm not going to worry about the dimension of it yet. I'm just going to move it and move it slightly out away from the curtain wall. So now when I accept that and go back in, it's telling me it's going to delete some elements of the curtain wall in order to attach it. So it's going to delete the top frame of the curtain wall. I'm just going to say yes, that's okay, delete elements. And you can see that on this side, the curtain wall is actually following the line of the roof. Does that make sense? I think I'm going to pause the video there. Get back into it then. So let's do the same thing over here. We've got this slight overhang of the roof here, so we know the curtain wall is going to attach easy enough. So I'm just going to select the curtain wall, attach the top base, select the roof. It's telling me it's deleting the top elements, that's fine. And now the curtain wall is attached to the roof. So I'm just going to do one more thing on curtain walls, and then we get back to the roofs, just because curtain walls are so useful. So we have a curtain wall here, and it's a nice big piece of glazing. It probably doesn't comply with the current building regulations in relation to insulation, but we won't worry about that right now. But it's okay, we've got glazing and everything, but if you have a glazed wall opening out into your garden, you want to get out into the garden. You want to be able to get out through the glazed wall. You don't want to be stuck in there like a goldfish. So we can actually modify all the individual elements of the curtain wall as well. And this is a useful way of using Revit that you can use in many, many different situations. If I roll the cursor on top of, let's say, this element here, and I press the tab button, it starts by selecting the entire curtain wall. If I tab it, it selects the connected curtain wall as well. If I tab it again, it selects the individual frame. If I tab it again, and so forth and so forth. So you can select everything that's underneath the cursor by using the tab button. But what I want to do is I want to select this panel here, and I want to turn it into a door so that we can get out of the house. So I'm going to roll it on top of this side here and press tab until it selects. You can see it's highlighted the entire, well, maybe you can't see it with this light and whatever, but there's a blue line around the entire panel here. And once I've done that, I can select it like this, and I can see that it's unpinned. Pinned and unpinned are important things in Revit. They're about locking things in place. So if it's probably pinned in your case here, so it's probably like this, which means that you can't change it. But if you unpin it like this, you pull the pin out of the panel, and now you can modify it and change it to something else. So once it's selected, the properties panel over here will give us different options as to what we put in there. Okay? And you can see that actually there's lots and lots of stuff. We can actually fill up the panel with bricks if we wanted to, but that's not useful at the moment. So let's just turn it into we can turn it into a glazed door or a solid door. Let's turn it into a glazed door. And you can see that it just pops a little glass door into place here with the handles and everything attached to it. Okay. I'm not getting. Okay, so yeah, just to finish off the curtain wall stuff. Did I start this recording again? Yeah, I did. If we have a door in here, and this door isn't necessarily set up for this position, because you can see it's actually an internal door. It's too thick, it's protruding outside. You would need to set up your own type of door for that, but it's good enough to start with. We then would want to maybe remove the frame underneath the door. It's possible that the curtain wall comes with a frame under the door, and if it comes in one piece from a manufacturer, but it's also possible it doesn't come with the frame under the door. So if you ever need to do that, you can again just roll the cursor over it and tab until you select the individual frame, and then you can just delete it by pressing the delete button. And you can see it stretches the door down to the ground to take account of the frame being taken out. Simple enough, isn't it? Yes, Shane. Okay. So that's pretty much, that's just like an introduction to the curtain wall and what you can do with it in a very simple way. And I just wanted to do that because it's a useful tool to have when you're starting out. Okay, so back to the roof again. Now, we've set up a roof, but if I click on the roof here, and let's say we're happy with the geometry, for some reason we want to have a roof like that. If I click on it, you can see over here the properties tab just shows basic roof, generic, 600 millimeters. And that's not what we want the roof to be made of, because you must have a specific idea as to what you want your roof to be made of, and you don't want it to be made of generic gray stuff. So we can come in here, once it's selected, we can come in and press Edit Type. And here we come into the type properties of the roof. So I'm going to modify the roof. But before I modify it, I'm going to duplicate it. And the reason for that is I don't want to change all the basic roofs in the project. I want to keep that basic roof as it is. I don't want to modify that. I want to give my new roof a name of its own. So I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call this one Test Roof. Okay. So now I can come into the very first line up here where it says structure, and I can edit the structure of the roof. So we can see that there's one layer in the roof here. It's called structure, default roof, and it's 600 millimeters thick. I want to add in an external finish, which is going to be some tiles or something like that. An internal finish, which is going to be some plasterboard, gypsum, something like that. And then the various air gaps and insulation that are within the roof. So we've got several layers in there. So we can just come down here to this insert button. Actually, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to press this preview button, because this preview shows us what the roof looks like at the moment. This is a cross section through the roof, so it's not really very exciting yet. So then I come up to insert, and as I press insert, you can see it just starts to pop different layers into the roof. They all have 0 thickness, and they're all called structure, and they don't really have a material yet. So we can come in here to the function of the various layers. I'm going to change this one to finish 1. So this is going to be the external finish. I'm going to change the material to some kind of roof material. Let's just see what comes up when I press this little button here. Okay, let's say we're in the States. Let's use wood shake, or you can use tiles or whatever. So I'm going to use this wood shake option. If I come over here to appearance, just to see what it looks like, it's going to look like that. It's kind of like a timber tile, usually made of cedar. And press OK. And then we give it a thickness. So we'll give it like a notional thickness of the entire tiling setup. So I'm going to say it's 20 mils. So now we have, down here you can see that it's put these wood shakes at the bottom of the roof. So now we need to move it up to the top. So I'm going to select it again, and down here I just press the up button. Up, up, up. So now it's at the top of the roof, above the core boundary. This makes sense, doesn't it? So let's do it again. We'll put in some air this time. So we want to make a ventilation cavity underneath the tiles. So I'm going to change this one to thermal air layer. We can leave it to category because it knows what air is. I'm going to make this one, let's say it's 35 millimeters. And then we just press up, and you can see that the layer is popping up through the roof here. So we'll just continue down. Let's just turn this material of the default structure. I'm going to turn that into rock wool or something, because we want to have some insulation in the middle. If I type in insulation at the top, we got some different insulation in here. There's one called rock wool bats. I'm going to select that. Press OK. And I'm going to change the thickness to 300, which is more realistic. And you can see that it modifies it. So this is now made of rock wool. And then I'm just going to put a cavity under here. So I put another thermal layer in because we want to run some cables underneath the rock wool, for example. Change it to category. Going to give this one 25 millimeters. And then I'm going to finish it off with some gypsum plasterboard. So I put in finish 2. Change this to, type in gypsum ceiling board. That seems about right. Let's press OK. And I'm going to make that also 25 millimeters. So it's 2 layers of gypsum board. And you can see, so now we've got the structure of the roof set up. All the way from the outside, the air gap, the insulation, another air gap, and the gypsum board inside. Notice that we don't add any of the timber structure in here. We leave the structure out completely because we're just setting up the layering of the roof. We're not worrying about how all these things are held together yet. We're just really concerned about the overall layering of the roof. I won't get onto structure till later on. So now if I press OK, and OK, you can see that our roof thickness is modified, and it's changed the color of the roof based on the material we chose. If I then come down here and change the graphic display options, this little cube down the bottom here, and change it to realistic, it should show us a graphical representation of those wood shakes, and there they are there. Okay, I'll pause that now. Okay, so now we've got a fairly attractive looking cedar clad roof. But the one thing about Revit is it always, because they're kind of, it's conceptual roof. So the problem you always have is that the edges of the roof are just shown as white because you're not cutting through it. If I was to go in here, for example, and go into the ground floor, and let's say I want to draw a section, I just come up here. I either go to View, Section, or there's also a shortcut up here just to draw sections. Both buttons do the same thing. Let's just save the project. So if I go to section, now I can just draw a cross section through the building. It's called section 3. Let's say I put it there. And you can see the arrows are telling me which way the cross section is facing. So it's facing out of the house. But I want to show the rest of the house in here. So while it's still selected, you can see that it has these 2 little arrows, directional arrows here. If I click that, it'll flip the direction of the section from one side to the other. So you can always decide which way you want to look. The other thing is it has a scope box. So this dotted blue line running around here is a scope box, and that tells me how far into the project the section is going to look. So I can grab that and stretch it out until it's taking in the entire house, like that. And once it's done, you can see it's created section 3 over here in the project browser. So I can come in here and look at how the house looks like in cross section. It's at 1 to 100. Let's turn it to 1 to 50 so you can see a little bit more detail. So you can see that the layers of the roof are shown that we've just put in. So it's set up in enough detail that we can start to think about the construction at a later stage. We might want to start adding things to this wall here because it's got no layers in it whatsoever. But we need to be able to control the edge of the roof here because the edge of roof edges are one of the most important things for certainly for residential architecture. Because if you just put a big fat end of a roof on something and you slap a big plastic fascia board on it, it just looks like shit. And that happens all over the world, and it looks like shit. It doesn't matter how many times you do it, it still looks like shit. So what you need to do is control the thickness of the fascia. The fascia is this edge here. So it's an architectural term for the flat edge at the end of the roof. It's called the fascia. But we can control that. So the first thing we can do is we can select the roof again. And over here under construction, you can see it's got an option for rafter cut. This is how the actual roof is cut. It's set to plumb cut at the moment. A plumb means straight down. And that's fine. But we have three options in here. We've got 2-cut plumb and 2-cut square. And 2-cut plumb is the most used one because we can control the thickness of the end of the roof. If I select 2-cut plumb here, it gives us a message about the curtain walls because it needs to modify the curtain walls as the roof is modifying, so that's okay, we'll delete that. But it does this immediately. It cuts the roof so it's got an extremely thin end to it, which also doesn't look very realistic. But that's because we haven't controlled the fascia depth yet. In here, we have the option to control the fascia depth, and I can set that to, let's say, 150 millimeters. If I apply that, the roof then is cut like that. Let's make it 200. That would make a little bit more sense. 200. Apply. So now we've controlled the thickness of the fascia of the roof, which is a very important thing to be able to do for, dealing with the quality of the architectural expression of the building. Okay. So that's the first thing. We have another option in here. I can go back and change it to 2-cut square, which is similar kind of thing. The only difference being it cuts the roof perpendicular to the line of the angle of the roof. So the more usual used one is the 2-cut plumb option, which is this one here. Okay. If I press WT again, and we see what we got open, we can close this one down. This one, WT. So now it's modified, you can see the edge here, it's modified the roof and it's got a much narrower profile as it comes into the courtyard there. The next thing we can do is we can add elements to the edge of the roof. And because this is used so often, there are specific buttons for this. If you remember last time we were here, I showed you how to make a profile to make this type of sweep element to add things to walls. But we can use the same principle to add things to the edge of the roof. So what I'm going to do is just come up to the Architecture tab again, come across the roof, and if I press the arrow, we get these three options down the bottom here: roof soffit, roof fascia, and roof gutter. So the first thing we're going to do is say fascia. So I'm going to add fascia to the roof. And the standard one it's got set up is either 25 millimeters thick by 250 meters deep or 19 by 200. So let's take the 19 by 200 because it fits with the what we've been doing. And then it's just asking us, well, where do we want to put it? So I can just say it's only selecting edges of roof, if you see there. The blue highlight, if you can see it on the screen there, I don't know if the lights are too bright in here, maybe we need to switch off the lights, is it's highlighting the edge of the roof here. If I just click that, it adds a fascia board to the roof. So I can just go around and click, well, maybe I don't want to add one there. Let's just leave it on the inside for the moment. So it's actually added a fascia board to the interface of the roof here. Let's just turn that up to 1 to 20 so we can see it. See what I mean? This fascia is just a sweep. It's exactly the same as the wall sweeps we were dealing with earlier. We can add a profile to that. We could make it any shape we potentially want it to be. So at the moment they give you two options, 19 millimeters by 200 and 25 by 250. But it's just a rectangle profile added to a sweep. So you can change the profile if you want. For example, if I select the fascia and I come over and edit the type, you can see we get the option to select the profile here. So if I modify that, I'm going to change it to the cornice profile that we were using last time around. Cornice, apply. And then you can see that we actually now have a fascia that looks like it's made of concrete or something. So it's exactly the same process. It's just got a specific button on it because it's used so often. Does that make sense? Let's just change it back. Edit type. I'm going to change it back to that one. So if you want to make your own shape of profile, same procedure is you go into New, Family, you use a metric profile, and then you just go in there and you sketch the shape of it exactly like I have it in the previous lesson, the video, which you've all watched 5 or 6 times at this stage. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now we've got a fascia in there. We need to add a gutter because we need to do something about the rain. It is Denmark after all. So we go into, did I set it going again? Yeah, I did. We go into roof again and roof gutter. So it actually has a button for the gutter. So I can come in here and set gutter, and I can either select it in the section view, or I can go around and select it in the 3D view. And you can see that if I select a gutter here, it actually forms a gutter at the edge of the roof here. Once again, this gutter is just a sweep, so you can make your own shape of gutter as well. So you just go make a metric profile, change the shape of the gutter. Okay. If it's not in the right position, you can select it again, and you can change its offset. So let's change it to minus 20, let's say minus 35. And you can move it into place just as simply as moving it up and down. That's kind of the extent of the 3D modeling you need to do for a roof. As you go further in it, you just add things with using 2D annotations. So a good rule of thumb when you're dealing with Revit is if you can see it from the outside, or if you can see it in detail, that's as much work as you need to do in 3D modeling. For example, there's lots of clips and small little things that are holding gutters in place, but you don't 3D model those because first of all you drive yourself crazy, and second of all it would take so much memory that the computer wouldn't be able to handle it, and third of all it doesn't. What are you doing it for? Because the final result is you're going to make a drawing that you're able to build from, and you're going to make a set of schedules that you can pull prices from and time scheduling from, is the idea. So if I go into a plan view here, like this, I want to have a look at what the house is looking like. I come up to default 3D view, and I can select a camera, and then I'm going to place the camera in the yard here, looking at the corner here, and then we can see what the house looks like if we turn it up a little bit. We can stretch this out if we want to. There you go. Okay, so we have this little model. It's kind of empty at the bottom. It's floating in space, so we need to give it a landscape. And usually you'll get some kind of details about the landscape from a surveyor or something along those lines for a project. Or you can grab the information from Google Earth, or you can grab it from in Denmark, you can grab it from, there's public databases of topography information you can pull the information from. That's not my subject. You're going to get taught about that after this project. But if we want to make a prototype house, we don't know exactly what kind of land we're sitting the house on. So I'm just going to make a flat piece of land and give it a material. So I'm going to come into, you have to come in, to do this, you have to come into the site view. Just double click that. So coming to site view, there's the house. I want to set up some topography, so I go to massing and site, this tab here, massing and site, and then we have this button called Topo Surface, and it gives you a nice picture of a topography in there. If I click on Topo Surface, it sets it up so I just have to place some points. and these points are at elevation 0, which is where the ground floor level is at. So I can just make a square there, 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 and just accept it. And now I've just made a topography. Now it just looks like a standard face, but it actually has more qualities to it than a 3D face has. For example, if I come into the section we made over here, roll out, you can see that it actually gives it a depth. There's actually a depth of the topography being shown. So once the topography is in there, I could suddenly see that, well, this house doesn't look like it's going to be very successful because it's built directly on top of the earth without any foundation. So that doesn't seem like a good idea. So we need to give it a foundation, okay? Is everybody with me on the topography front? Okay, pause it. Okay, so now I'm just going to give it a material. So select the topography, come over here to material by category, and I'm going to open the material dialog. And I'm going to just search for grass. And down here I've got two options, plant and grass. So I'm going to push this one into the project. Use render appearance. Okay. And now we've got some nice grass in the project. So in order to excavate it, the first thing we need to do is set up a level, because we want to have a foundation, and if we have a foundation, we need to have a level for that foundation to sit on. So I'm going to go into an elevation view here, and you can see that we only have level 1 and level 2 at the moment. But what we need to do is set up a foundation level, and the quickest way to set up a foundation level is just to copy an existing foundation. So I'm just going to select this foundation here. I can come up and press copy, and I'm just going to select it and move it down by, and type in 900 millimeters. So now we've got something called level 4, and it's placed at minus 900. Then I can select it and change the name to foundation level. So now we know exactly what we're working with. Yeah? Once we have the foundation level, I can start to set up an excavation. So I'm going to excavate the land all the way down to that foundation level. So let's go into the site plan again. And the excavation is under the massing and site tool here. And there's one option called building pad. And if I just let that load there, it shows you a little video. So basically you want to make this. And it's just like all the things in Revit. You make a loop of little pink lines, and it will then do what you want it to do in terms of the shape and so on. So I press building pad. I'm just going to draw a rectangle around the entire building. Let's just draw it from this area here all the way down to the corner here. Now we've got the shape of the excavation. We need to just tell it what level it's on. So we want it to be at 0, and we want it to be at foundation level. So I accept that. Look at 3D view. You can see that it's actually excavated the land within the site there. If we go into the section again, the entire house is sitting on a vacuum. Simple enough. Will I pause it?